One of the most powerful biblical stories that we have is the binding of Isaac, the Akedah. In fact, it's such an important story and lesson of faith that we include it in our daily prayers. Every morning we wake up, we repeat the Akedah, the binding of Isaac. When the sages chose what to be read in the synagogues on Rosh Hashanah, the binding of Isaac. The story tells us about God calling upon Abraham to sacrifice his only son, or to offer him as a sacrifice, and to climb Mount Moriah, to climb to the top of the mountain and offer his beloved son Isaac. Of course, in the end, an angel appears unto Abraham, tells him that it was just a test of Abraham's faith and commitment. It was the 10th and final test of Abraham, a test for the ages. Now, over the years, I am sure you have heard commentary and studied commentary as to all the questions you may have on this very difficult story. And people are extremely uncomfortable with the story. Why would God choose such a challenge? Why was Abraham willing to go ahead with such a challenge? What about Isaac's role in the challenge? Numerous questions. But today I would like to focus on one minor detail of that story. And that is, why was the mountain part of the story? Why did Abraham have to climb a mountain to do this? Why couldn't he just simply tell him to go to flat surface? What was the mountain part about? So for one thing, when you're told to climb a mountain, you know it's not going to be an easy journey. It means there's going to be some element of energy exercise. It's going to be a difficult climb. Whereas when you do on a flat surface, it all comes naturally to you. When you have to go up a steep incline, it takes a lot of effort. For another, a mountaintop has a connotation of solitude, of being alone, of being removed, of being isolated from society. You're out there on your own. And so when Abraham did what he did, he was very much alone. You see, Abraham didn't take any full-page ads in the Mamre Times saying, "This is what I'm about to do." He didn't alert CNN or Fox News and say, "This is what I'm about to do." He didn't tell anybody. Who amongst his contemporaries would applaud him for this great challenge? No one. Who would admire the depth of his commitment and the power of his sacrifice? No one. Who would cheer him on? No one. And yet there he is, waking up early in the morning and going on this lonely journey to faithfully carry out God's will. Abraham met God alone on the top of a mountain. No stadiums filled with 85,000 screaming fans, no fireworks going off, no balloon drop for him. The people of his time would think he's gone totally nuts. Echad haya Avraham. Abraham was one. He was his own man. And yet humanity and civilization as we know it today exists because of what he brought to the world, because of what his vision was, because of his sacrifice, because he had the faith and the courage to meet God alone at the top of the mountain. And because of that, everything that happened thereafter in the history of the man has been changed. My friends, the story of Abraham is not just the story about an individual. The image of our Zayda, of our great-grandfather, making the climb up this mountain is your story. It's my story. It's the Jewish people's story. The story of the Akedah not only applauds what Abraham did at the top of the mountain some 3,700 years ago, but it is applauding each and every single one of us who meet God alone at the top of a mountain. Those who step up with courage or convictions, ready to make sacrifices in our own lives, whether big or small, when no one out there is singing your praises for it, when no one out there may understand what it is that you're doing, when you're being questioned for every action that you do, you're meeting God alone at the top of a mountain. When it comes to Jewish practice, and you haven't been brought up with tradition, you weren't raised in such a home, and yet you begin to discover what it's all about. And you start slowly. You begin to try to only bring kosher products into the house. And it's a struggle. And it's difficult. And it's not easy. And then to top it off, your brother-in-law is saying to you, what, are you gone crazy? Have you gone mad? Or your mother-in-law, or your own parents, or at times your children. What are you doing? And then your friend calls you to go out to this restaurant that you've gone to for years, and you say, but we're starting to try going kosher. So not only is it difficult personally, but socially you find that circle around you that you've been so accustomed to looking at you and mocking you. You're meeting God alone at the top of a mountain. When your weekend suddenly takes on a whole new meaning, because you're beginning to introduce Shabbat into your life, into your family's life. And again, your acquaintances or your family members say, what do you mean we're not going Saturday to the beach or to the movies? You do what? You go to the synagogue on Saturday? Since when did you become religious? And you say, no, I just want to try to introduce Shabbat. And they look at you like you came from Mars. What happened to you? You may not be doing the whole 9 yards. You may just be picking a piece here and a piece there, but you're trying. And you're struggling. And at some point, and I know this from the experience of being involved in this for some close to 33 years, at some point you hit that brick wall and you say, what for? It's so difficult. No one's appreciating it anyway. My kids are complaining. You're meeting God alone at the top of a mountain. You decide you want to start taking Torah classes, or you wake up in the morning to put on tefillin. I have an acquaintance of mine. We have email correspondence on a regular basis. And he tells me that his wife cannot handle him wanting to put on tefillin. Just can't accept it. So he gets up real early in the morning and he hides downstairs in one of the rooms and he quickly puts on tefillin. And he's done this now for some 3 decades. He's meeting God alone at the top of a mountain. As much as he has tried to convince her it's just a minute, she has a problem with straps. She doesn't like the idea of seeing her husband in straps. So she doesn't see. To some people, it looks ridiculous. He's meeting God alone at the top of the mountain in those 60 seconds. In my years, I have had the merit and honor to serve as the Rebbe's emissary in the Conejo Valley, and I have seen some amazing things. I have seen people come from what we would call ground zero in terms of their Judaism, and they're alive and they're on fire. And not only are they passionate about Judaism, but now they have become the vehicle to bring others in and to talk others who are coming into this and wondering, is it all worth it? And they're there to comfort them and to say, I know that struggle, I've been there. I know that climb, I've been there. The Talmud tells us, from my teachers I have learned a great deal, but from my students far more. I want you to know something. For those of you in this room that have not been raised in Jewish tradition, were not raised in the home of Kashrus and Shabbos, I want you to understand that for those of us that were, it all comes naturally. I may have kept kosher for 53 years of my life, but I need to be honest with you, it took no effort. I don't struggle with it. It's natural for me. That's just the way I was raised. I don't have cravings for certain foods that so many struggle with because I have no idea what it tastes like. Besides, I'm a very picky eater. To me, when I pass the lobster station in the supermarket, I run away. I get scared. I'm looking for raid. But I hear from others the struggle that they have. So I want you to understand that your attempt to keep kashrus and your attempt to keep Shabbos it takes so much more effort on your part than it does for the individual raised in a traditional home, because for them it's natural. You're the ones doing the climb. You're the ones doing the effort. You're the ones changing the world. Don't underestimate your contribution to the Jewish whole. Don't underestimate the love that God has for you when He sees you attempting and making this climb up the mountain. There was a family in my community who over the years started taking this journey up the mountain, bringing Yiddishkeit into their lives one mitzvah at a time. They had a 13-year-old son, and he started going to a Jewish school. The kid's grandfather, who lived out of town, heard about this change. A yeshiva boy for a grandson? Chas v'shalom. I don't think he said chas v'shalom, but the expression was pretty similar to that, but with using some foul language. To put it mildly, this very secular, educated, and quite wealthy grandfather was not pleased about this. He informed the family that he would be paying a visit to Southern California and that he would like to take his grandson out for a private dinner at a fine restaurant. His grandson explained to his grandpa that he no longer goes to those fine restaurants, that it would have to be a kosher restaurant. And there are some pretty nice ones in Southern California. And his grandfather said he wouldn't be caught dead in a kosher restaurant. So they met at a Starbucks. He explained to his grandson that religion was the biggest scam that ever came to earth, and that he should have no part of it, and that he should immediately drop out of the school, and that he will fund him going to the finest private schools, but not to the Jewish day school. The boy refused. He said, I like it there. I like what I'm learning. I enjoy it. So the grandfather changed the language, and he spoke in the universal language that everyone understands. He offered the boy, his grandson, a stipend of $10,000 a month for a year. Drop out of the school. The boy turned him down. He upped the offer to $15,000 a month for 12 months. It would go straight into his account every single month. Nothing doing. This went on for some time. He finally made an offer of $700,000 to be deposited in a savings account that he will have access to when he turned 21 years old. He told him, with the interest, you have no idea, you would be a millionaire at 21 years old. Just drop out of the school. I would take the deal. The boy turned to his grandfather and said, Grandpa, one day you'll find out that the greatest gift is not one you can give me or buy me. The greatest gift is the gift that God gave us both. I found this gift. I hope one day you will too. A 13-year-old kid talking like that. Such clarity, such strength of conviction. It's the spirit and the sacrifice of Abraham all over again. It's the courage to walk up a mountain. Now we each, everyone in this room, every single one of us, we each have a mountain to climb. We each have our own challenges to meet, our own individual tests to withstand. I remember hearing this very simple story, but it's always remained with me, and I always think about it. There was this young woman who headed up a major business in New York City. And she began attending Torah classes and studying about Jewish practice and observance. And over time, she decided that she would like to try this kosher thing. She would like to bring kosher into her life. She called a rabbi, and she said, I've made up my mind. I want to start keeping kosher. Can we arrange an appointment for you to come over to the house, go over all the instructions, and kosher my kitchen? Sure, no problem. The rabbi makes up an evening, comes over. He has his blowtorch in hand. He has the handbook. And they start going through all the things on the counter and the cupboards, what you have to change, what you have to buy new, what we can kosher. And then the rabbi notices on the counter was a pack of Chiclets gum. And he says, oh, by the way, when you start going kosher, you're going to have to get rid of that because it's not a kosher brand of gum. The woman looked at him as if the whole world just came crashing down. Said, what? Give up Chiclets gum? No way. Forget the deal. Can't do it. And he started explaining to her, look, there's going to be products, it's going to be difficult, it's going to take time, and there's other gum products out there that taste just as good, I'm sure. And eventually, she went along with it, and she koshered the house. And I said, a simple story. I don't repeat the story to mock the woman, to belittle the woman. On the contrary, every one of us has that Chiclets gum. We all have those items that we hold on to. That's difficult for us to give up. To others, it may look silly. You're ready to do that, but you can't give up the little pack of gum? Yeah, but to them, that's their mountain. I don't mock anyone for their mountains because their mountains are difficult for them to climb. It may not be difficult for you to climb because we each have our own unique mountain to climb. Some of you may have heard of a well-known professor, Dr. Velvel Green, who passed away a few years ago. Velvel Green started out in Minnesota. He was a very famous scientist working for NASA. He was quite secular. And he started getting involved with Chabad in Minnesota with Rabbi Feller. And in fact, he became close friends with Rabbi Feller. He also had many extensive correspondence with the Lubavitcher Rebbe, many on the subject of science. And slowly but surely began to see the universe in a new light. But there were still things about the essence of Judaism that bothered him, that held him back from making that jump, that climb. He loved the discussions, he loved the debate, but when it came to practice, he had his hesitations. One day before he was about to leave on a business trip, Rabbi Feller calls him and says, Velvel, before you take off on this trip, I want you to do me a favor. I want you to call the airline, and I want you to order a kosher meal. Some of you may remember that when you used to go on planes, they served meals. Remember in the olden days, they would say, what would you like, right? You were able to order a kosher meal, not just when you flew to Israel, but any flight you were able to order a kosher meal in advance. So Rabbi Feller tells Professor Green, I'd like you to order a kosher meal. He says, why? Are you nuts? I don't keep kosher. Why should I order the kosher meal? He says, it's a good thing for you to do. Besides, you're very popular in Minnesota. Everyone knows who you are. And you're going to get on the plane, and people will see, oh, Professor Green is here, and they're going to hear you order a kosher meal. It may inspire some other Jews as well. Besides, when you're up there in God's territory, it's a good thing to do. So Green says, is it going to make you happy? The fellow says, very happy. He says, okay, I'll do it for you. I think it's idiotic, but I'll do it. He calls the airline. He orders the kosher meal. The next day, Professor Green boards his flight, and it's mealtime. And the flight attendant comes by and hands him the regular meal. And he's ready with the little speech the rabbi prepped him with. He clears his throat, makes sure everybody on the plane hears, no, ma'am, I ordered a kosher meal. And what's the name on that reservation? Velvel Green. Dr. Velvel Green. I ordered a kosher meal. Of course, the whole plane hears. If you've ever heard Professor Green speak, he has a booming voice. Everyone on the flight heard Professor Green, kosher meal. She says, okay, I'll be right back. 2 minutes go by, 5 minutes go by, 10 minutes go by, 15 minutes go by. His fellow passengers are feasting on chicken parmesan or Salisbury steak with gusto. They're wiping the gravy up with the little roll that they put in there, and the aroma is killing him because he's a big man. He's very hungry. So he pushes the buzzer. And the flight attendant comes back and he says, excuse me, my kosher meal. We're still checking. We'll get right back to you. 20 more minutes goes by. By the time everyone on the plane had finished eating the meal, the flight attendant comes back to his seat. And she has that look. That look that says, you're going to be hungry today. There must have been some mistake because we don't seem to have a kosher meal on the plane. I can get you one of the other meals. And he's about to say, sure, I'll take the steak, but everyone's head is turning. Now, how would he look? He already said, make this whole thing, he wants the kosher meal, kosher meal. Now he's going to say, I'll eat the treif. He's not going to look good. So he can't say, yes, I'll take it. He says, no, I won't take it. And he's sitting there, and he's hungry. He's very hungry, and he's very angry. He's angry at the airline. He's angry at himself for listening to this mishigas. He's even angry at God. How could you not have arranged for this kosher meal to be there? But mostly, his anger is at Rabbi Feller. He did this to me. The flight was a stopover. It lands at some airport past midnight. He's got a 1-hour stopover. He gets into the terminal and he sees the only store left open was a hot dog stand. The hot dogs look good. They're plump. They're juicy. They smell real good. Who was here Tuesday night? You saw those hot dogs? With the warm sauerkraut next to it? Oh, that was they good. I keep asking them every dinner, could you just bring back the hot dogs? Who needs the prime rib? Who needs anything? Just give us hot dogs. It's cheaper. It's easier. Anyway, Professor Green sees the hot dog stand. He's very hungry. But he's more angry than hungry. So he has a plan. He goes for the payphone. Remember those? In the days when you got meals on the plane, there was also payphones. Who remembers this? There was something called a collect call. Remember collect calls? Who remembers person-to-person collect calls? Those were the expensive kind. So he goes to the payphone, and he makes a person-to-person collect call to Rabbi Feller. Rabbi Feller wakes up in the middle of the night with the phone ringing. We used to answer home phones in those days. The operator says, I have a person-to-person collect call from Professor Velvel Green. Will you accept the charges? Yes. What happened? He accepts the charges. Oh, Rabbi Feller. Yes. What happened, Velvel? This is a very upset and hungry Professor Green calling you. I'll have you know that they did not have my kosher meal on the plane. I'll have you know that I am standing now 15 feet away from a hot dog stand. A non-kosher hot dog stand, that is. And before I go ahead and buy one and eat it, I just wanted to wake you up to tell you that I'm going to eat it. And I'm going to put mustard on it and onions on it and relish on it. And when I finish that one, I'm going to buy me a second one. And with every bite, I'm going to think of you, Rabbi Feller. And I just needed you to know that. The rabbi says, don't hang up yet. Professor, on many occasions, you've asked me this question. What is the essence of Judaism? Tonight, right here on this telephone conversation, I'm going to tell you what it's all about. It's about passing that hot dog stand and not buying the hot dog. That's the essence of Judaism. Good night, Professor. And he hangs up the phone. Is he nuts? The essence of Judaism is me passing the hot dog stand? How did I ever like this guy? He's crazy. So he goes right online to the hot dog stand, and he's next online, and he takes out his money, and he's ready to order. And as he tells the story, I just froze. I just froze. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I was hungry. I was angry. And those hot dogs looked better and better with each rotation of the grill. But at that moment, he said, I got it. I understood what Rabbi Feller was trying to say. There are those moments in life, those times that God asks you to make a sacrifice. It's not always about big things. It's not always about surrendering our lives. It's not about becoming saints. Sometimes it's rather simple. Sometimes it's the chiclets gum. Sometimes it's about walking past a hot dog stand. Sometimes it's about the mundane things in life where God meets you alone at the top of a mountain. How do we respond? Velvel Green, who we hosted in the Conejo Valley numerous times, says, I never bought the hot dog that night, and I never put another piece of non-kosher food in my mouth since then. What's our chiclets? What is the hot dog in our life? It's true in all aspects of life. And it's not just when we come to ritual and not just when we come to the spiritual. We each have our own hurdles, our own challenges, and sometimes it feels like an uphill battle, like we're walking up the steps of an escalator. But it's not the escalator that's going up we're walking up. It's the escalator coming down, and we're trying to walk up. Every time we feel we succeed a little bit, we end up finding ourselves going a little down as well, and we falter. And sometimes it hurts. And sometimes we cry. And that's okay too. Those that go mountain or rock climbing will tell you that not every step results in going higher. Sometimes you slip down a notch. But even with those minor setbacks, we carry on. See, life is not a straight line, and it's not a well-paved road. Judaism's view of the righteous person is not necessarily one that never falters. The righteous person is the one who falls, and falls again and again, but gets up each time and continues the climb. Whether your particular mountain to climb is in the arena of your career or business-related matters, or in the relationships in your home, or the relationships with your parents or with your children, whatever area your mountain is, your difficulty is, instead of allowing the setbacks to send you hurling down the mountain, we have to learn from the experience, and we have to use it as a springboard to climb even higher the next day. There's a very strange biblical story about Jacob. It's one of the strange Bible stories. Jacob is returning to his homeland after being away for many years. He's alone at night, and the Torah tells us this mysterious man, who we later know to be an angel, begins to wrestle. And they have a wrestling match, and the wrestling match goes on all through the night, and Jacob would not surrender. And it says he wrestled with him until the break of dawn. Jacob knew that he needed to defend himself. He needed to fight a brave fight. And when the assailant sees that he cannot overpower Jacob, he strikes him on the hip, dislocating Jacob's hip. And despite the pain, Jacob won't surrender. He won't let go. The attacker grows desperate and appeals to Jacob to release him. Jacob understands that this is no ordinary opponent, but he understands now that it's a heavenly emissary. It was the guardian angel of his brother Esau. So Jacob says to this angel, I will not let you go until you bless me. And the angel says, your name shall no longer be called Yaakov, but Yisrael, Israel. Ki sarisa im Elokim v'im hanoshim v'tuchal. Because you have struggled with the divine and with man, and you have prevailed. So what does Israel mean? What does our very name mean? What does it mean to be a Jew? It means that even when you're all alone, even when it's a struggle, even when you're wrestling with the divine, you still hang in there. You persevere. You do the right thing. You turn suffering into a blessing. That's the story of the Jew. That's the story of Jacob. That's our story every single day. You get up on your feet and you continue the climb. Back in the 1960s, there was a young Jewish man living in Mexico. His name was Solomon Mizrahi. Solomon struggled desperately to eke out a living to support his family. Thank you. He established a business in Mexico importing coffee, which he would sell all around Mexico. It was a very competitive business. It was a difficult business. One day, Solomon negotiated a deal with a Japanese supplier to buy a huge amount of coffee at an incredible low price. It was a long-term contract. It was a sweet deal. This was it. This was the dream deal that every businessman waits for and knows this is the deal that's going to bring you wealth. He came home that night. He told his wife that the profit margin of this deal will allow them to buy a beautiful house. They will no longer live in poverty. They will be wealthy people. They celebrated all night. The next day, the Japanese supplier showed up at Solomon Mizrahi's office, looking very somber. He said, "Mr. Mizrahi, the price I quoted you was an error. It was too low. It was a mistake. Nevertheless, as an agent for my company, I signed on that contract. If you hold me to that contract, which is in your right, my company said they will honor it. But I most certainly will lose my job for it. The choice is yours." Solomon Mizrahi didn't blink an eye. He took the contract and he ripped it up. Now imagine yourself in that position. You're struggling. You're renting a small place. Your wife is always saying, "When can we ever afford to buy a house?" You signed a deal honestly. You did nothing unethical. A deal is a deal. Business is business. What would you do? Solomon Mizrahi was not going to move up by stepping on someone else's back. He met God alone on that mountain, in that office, at that very moment. I am certain that his business associates might have told him he was crazy. But I'm also certain that God had nachas that day. And just like that, the big dream was over. Solomon Mizrahi continued to struggle. He tried to generate whatever business he could, but no windfall opportunities came along. But he never looked back with regret. Years later, the same Japanese man left the coffee company, and he moved on to become an executive of a big electronics company in Japan. The company at the time developed cutting-edge technology in the television department, and they decided that they wanted to market it in Mexico, and that they wanted to find one individual to give the exclusive rights to distribute these TVs all throughout the country. Without missing a beat, the Japanese fellow pipes up and he says, "And I know just the man." Solomon Mizrahi was given the exclusive rights. Any retail store in Mexico that wished to sell these popular TVs had to go through Solomon Mizrahi. Solomon Mizrahi eventually became a very wealthy and philanthropic man, supporting many Jewish organizations and worthy causes all over the world. Not every story has a happy ending like that. Sometimes we meet God alone at the top of the mountain and we do the right thing and we don't get that reward, we don't get that contract at the end, but it doesn't take away from the nachas that we brought to God at that very moment and the blessings somehow that He will find a way to give us in our lives. 1998, one of the runners in the New York City Marathon was a woman by the name of Zoe Kaplowitz. Zoe was 46 years old. She suffered from multiple sclerosis. She's been that way for 20 years. She can only walk with the help of 2 crutches, one slow, painful step at a time. And there she was on a cold day in November, one of thousands who came to run the marathon. She walked for more than 31 hours and 15 minutes. She finished the 26-mile race literally with her left foot dragging. She came in last, but by God, she finished that race. And she was asked, "Why did you do it?" And she said, "When you're born, God gives you a television set with hundreds of channels. Sometimes you get to a channel and it only has static. You have a choice. You can sit in front of that one channel for the rest of your life and stare at the static, or you can get up and change the channel. My commitment in life was to change the channel as frequently as possible. Climbing a mountain takes effort. You have to get up from the couch. You got to get up from the recliner. You got to get up and begin the climb." Years ago, Elie Wiesel, the famous author the spokesperson of conscience who left this world a few months ago, was asked by the Dalai Lama if he would come see him. He wanted to talk to him. And during the meeting, Elie Wiesel said to him, with all due respect, why was it so important for you to see me? And the Dalai Lama answered, Mr. Wiesel, your people have suffered a lot when you went into exile 2,000 years ago. But amazingly, you're still there. My people just left our homeland. We're in exile. Teach us how to survive. How did you do it? How did the Jews continue to do it? The truth is that the secret to our survival didn't begin with events 2,000 years ago. It began very well before that. It began with a man named Abraham who met God alone at the top of a mountain. And we've been meeting God at the top of that mountain ever since. Think about it. What are the odds, after all these centuries and millennia of exile and persecution, that we would still be here in August of 2016? It's because we're a people that know that even when we struggle, even when we wrestle, even when we're hurt, even when we're wounded, somehow we will prevail. Yisrael. It's who we are. It's who you are. We never stop climbing that mountain, and we never will. In his memoir of the Eichmann trial, Israeli prosecutor Gideon Hausner writes that the evil Eichmann Yamach Shemai took a peroiches. On the ark, we have this beautiful velvet cover. You notice it in your synagogues. So Eichmann took a peroiches, a cover of an ark, a velvet cover, that once covered a beautiful ark in a synagogue in Poland. And this evil man hung it on the doorway to the gas chamber. Embroidered in that peroiches were the words, Zeh hashar la'Hashem tzadikim yavovo. This is the gate to God. The righteous will enter it. Now this sadistic monster, of course, did it to taunt the Jews, to make mockery of God, to make mockery of humanity as they were led to their deaths. But you know what, ladies and gentlemen? We still have a peroiches. We still have arks. We still have a Torah. We still have synagogues. The Jewish people are still here because we got up. We never gave up. We rose up like lions. It's the hallmark of the Jewish people. This is what we've always been about. Eichmann and his like took my father's whole family. He took my grandparents. He took so many of your grandparents. They took our Zaydis, they took our bubbies, they took our aunts, they took our uncles, they took our brothers and sisters, and these monsters forced our loved ones to walk past that peroiches into the gas chambers. But my dear friends, they may have been wounded, but they did not defeat us. Because you see, we took that peroiches back, and we put it up not just on one ark, not just on two, but on thousands. On tens of thousands. We rebuilt, we transplanted every one of those synagogues because we never stop climbing, because we don't quit. Maybe we were down, but we were certainly not out. We wrestled back. We wrestled with man, we wrestled with God, but we would not stop our climb. From every bout of adversity, we rebounded stronger than before. From every episode of destruction, we rebuilt bigger and better than before. Sure, it would have been easy to quit and to give up and to throw in the towel and to walk away. But thanks to the path that has been paved to us by Abraham, our father, the Jewish people of history have always learned to climb that mountain. I told this story at the JLI retreat last year, and I'll repeat it again. One of those who went through the hell of the Holocaust was a man by the name of Chaim Shapiro. He survived 4 concentration camps. At the start of the war, Chaim had a beautiful family, a wife, and 8 children. Within the span of a little over a year, he lost his wife and 7 of his 8 children, without ever even sitting Shiva for them. After the war, Chaim, along with his only surviving son, Baruch, were liberated from Buchenwald. They wallowed in the DP camps for nearly 3 years, until finally in 1948 they gained passage on an immigrant ship and arrived in Israel, just in time. Soon afterwards, young Baruch Shapiro volunteered to fight in Israel's War of Independence, a desperate battle for survival against overwhelming odds. Without any previous training, he was taken to a ravine, handed a rifle, taught how to shoot a few bullets, and sent off to the front line. Baruch distinguished himself in battle. He joined Yitzhak Rabin's Harold Brigade. And while fighting to break the Arab siege on Jerusalem, Baruch received a field commission as an officer and was awarded a medal for bravery under fire. One day, while sitting in his tiny living room in Tel Aviv, Chaim Shapiro glanced out the window, and he saw what no soldier's parent ever wants to see: a delegation heading up the path to his apartment. They say that Chaim Shapiro opened the door before they knocked. They say that Chaim Shapiro never read the telegram. He just crumpled it in his hands because he knew his last remaining son was also gone. With regards to the funeral arrangements, Chaim Shapiro made only one request. He wanted his son buried in Jerusalem. The next day, hundreds of mourners gathered on Mount Herzl, the National Military Cemetery in Jerusalem. Most of them never knew Baruch Shapiro or his father Chaim. But they heard of this terrible tragedy and they wanted to pay their respects. Yigal Yadin, the IDF chief of staff, the man who would later discover Masada, stood by Chaim Shapiro's side. What Hitler had not finished in the crematoria had ended at the hands of an Arab bullet. The last Shapiro son. As the coffin was being lowered in the ground, a strange thing happened. Chaim Shapiro began to sing. People thought he had completely lost his mind, and understandably so. Yigal Yadin put his arm around Chaim's shoulder, trying to comfort him. Someone else ran to get him a cup of water, but he struggled, he pushed them off, and he continued to sing his song. The crowd had no idea what to make of it until finally Chaim Shapiro looked at them and he said, "I have been through a hell the likes of which most people could never, ever imagine. I lost more than 70 relatives in less than 1 year, including 7 of my children, my wife, and my parents. I have no place to mourn them, no grave. Their ashes in the skies over Europe, and I have no idea why they died. But this son, at least this son, I know why he died. He died so we can have a home for the Jewish people in the land of Israel. And he has a grave here in Jerusalem. And that's not reason to cry, it's reason to sing." Chaim Shapiro finished speaking. He began to sing once more, this time grabbing the people's hands to dance. 300 mourners joined him, singing and dancing against the setting sun of the Jerusalem sky. If any of you have the occasion to visit Mount Herzl, Israel's National Military Cemetery in Jerusalem, perhaps you can stop by the section where the graves from 1948 lie. It is there that you will find the lonely grave of one Baruch Shapiro. Look at his stone and close your eyes And remember the story I shared with you here this morning. And you will understand why the Jewish people have never, can never, and will never be destroyed. That if there's one irrefutable truth of history, it's that Am Yisrael Chai. You see, my dear friends, we never have and we never will stop the climb. Nothing will deter us. Nothing can hold us back. I'd like to conclude with one more beautiful story. It may sound like something out of the Dark Ages, but it actually took place in the year 2007. In Baku, Azerbaijan, there's a Jewish woman who married a non-Jew who was loosely affiliated with the Russian Orthodox Church. He was never a practicing or active member of the church, so that when the woman told him that she wanted to enroll their 9-year-old daughter in the local Chabad day school called Avner, he said fine. It didn't really matter much to him. As time went on, however, the man began to notice things. The child would come home all animated and excited about her Jewish studies. Her eyes would light up whenever she spoke about the Jewish holidays, about davening, about the Torah portion, about its lessons. Every Friday night, she would recite these blessings before lighting a candle. And there was this obvious joy and radiance about her when it came to all of these Jewish practices. It started to bother him. And one day he said to his wife, if our daughter is going to be doing all these Jewish things, then the least I have the right to is to make sure she's also baptized in my church. Mother and daughter were not happy about this, but the father drew the line in the sand. Either she gets baptized, or the deal would be she goes out of the Jewish school. The mother had no choice but to acquiesce. And sure enough, the man made an appointment for the following Friday afternoon with the priest of a church in a small Russian town. And during the meeting, the priest asked the girl if she indeed wanted to become a Christian, if she was prepared to take into her heart everything that she would need to take into her heart. And she said, no, I'm a Jew. At which point her father gave her a stern look, which sent a warning her way that you better cooperate here. And from there, she simply kept silent. There was a pronouncement of prayers, and she was dunked into some water. As this was going on, there was a tremendous sadness all about her. The priest started going through all of his rituals. The little girl began playing the holiday songs she learned at Chabad in her mind. Her mental singing was interrupted when the priest gave her an instruction and said, now, as a sign of your acceptance, I want you to go over there and light a candle. This brave 9-year-old child looked up at the clock. She walked over to the wall. She covered her eyes. And with everything she did, with all the energy she had, she did this, and she made the blessings on a Shabbos candle in the church. She certainly didn't get applause from anyone in that room. On that Friday night in a Russian Orthodox church in Azerbaijan, she met God alone on the top of a mountain. My friends, when we read about Abraham walking up that mountain, when you read that story tomorrow morning in your prayers, you're reading about this little girl in Azerbaijan. You're reading about our aunts and our cousins who walked into the gas chambers at Treblinka, proclaiming Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. You're reading about Jacob wrestling with an angel. You're reading about Solomon Mizrahi tearing up a contract. You're reading about Professor Volvo Green at a hot dog stand in an airport terminal. You're reading about a woman in Manhattan who gave up her chiclets gum. You're reading about Chaim Shapiro standing before the grave of his son. When we read about Abraham walking up the mountain, we're reading about each and every single one of you in this room, who no one applauds or admires your efforts, but you make sacrifices big and small. You make sacrifices for Judaism and sacrifices for your family and sacrifices for your friends and sacrifices for total strangers. You climb that mountain every day and you meet God alone at the top of that mountain. My dear friends, if I may suggest that every once in a while, it might be a good idea to spend some quiet time alone. no phones, no computers, no televisions, no people around you. Pretend there's no one else in the world at that moment, just you and God. Nobody to impress, nobody to imitate, no one to appease. No politically correct or incorrect positions, just you and God. Think deeply about your inner truths, your beliefs, your fears. Think about your particular and personal challenges, your mountains. We each have our unique mountain to climb, but we're also each given the strength to climb that unique mountain. The strength is there. It's in you. Yes, you can. But you need to make the move. You need to start the climb. And maybe you won't reach the peak right away, or maybe it looks invincible, or maybe you're afraid of heights. But I want you to trust me on this. You're no different than the rest of us in this room, because we're each afraid of climbing our own mountain. Oh, it's easy for me to climb someone else's mountain, but it's very hard for me to climb my own. If it's the struggle in your lives within the home, if it's the marriage that's in need of attention and repair, if that's your mountain to climb, don't walk away. And if your mountain is not within your control to change, whether it's health or economic hardships or a need for a shidduch or a match for yourself or for your children, or you're indeed in need of a miracle, whatever areas of life distress you, that weigh you down, have that conversation with God. Speak to Him using real words, sounds. Share your sorrows, share your grievances, share your hurt, even your anger. But allow there to be room for healing, for reconciliation, and then get on that mountain and climb. Thank you very much.